Hi, this is Terry Bates again from the Cornell Lake Erie Research and Extension Lab. Going to bring you another tutorial about MyEV, how to use MyEV in your viticulture production practices. And today we're going to talk about money. So everyone's driven by, having to run a business and make money at that business. And today's tutorial is about how you can use MyEV to evaluate your vineyard operation in terms of, am I making or losing money? What blocks am I making and or losing money in? Or from a sub block level, where am I gaining and losing money? So where can I focus my management practices for next year to improve the profitability of my farm? And I'm going to show you two different levels on how we do this. So go to the MyEV tool on efficientvineyard.com. And this pulls up my default farm, which is the Cornell Lake Erie Research and Extension Lab. And right now this is my farm, and I have my blocks, and my blocks are colored and labeled by variety. So we have 11 different varieties, and we sell to 4 different either processors, wineries. So different varieties, different price points, different cost of production on these different blocks. So all of that needs to be captured into a profit loss analysis, either at the block level or at the sub block level. So first, I'm going to show you how to do it at the block level. And both workflows or strategies are the same, right? I either have block level information or I have spatial data on a sub block level. I'm going to take that data, I'm going to download it as a CSV file that can be, open in Excel. I can add my economic data to that file. So my tons per acre, my price per ton, my production costs, and then I can calculate a profit loss. So have that as a column in my Excel file, upload that back to MyEV and to visualize spatially what's happening in the vineyard. I'm going to go to the Claro facility. So I have all these blocks. These blocks have data associated with them, and the data are these headers, and these will be the same headers. If you download this data as a CSV file, these will be all the headers that are in that CSV file. And so you can add or subtract the data headers that you want right in MyEV by going to the edit button up here. And so each one of those headers, so there's 27 headers, I think, already in this file. I could add a 28th, or I could take away some of them if I wanted. And then also, if I wanted to edit any of the data that's underneath one of these headers, say in a particular block, I can go to that block. So this particular Railroad Concord block has this block level data associated with it. I could also hit this edit button and change the values in any one of these headers. And I could do that for every single block. Click, change, click, change, click, change. And that can be kind of time consuming. So what I like to do is I download this data set, I change the data set, I re-upload it, and it's much faster and easier to use. So what I do in this case is I hit this download button. I download it as a CSV file, and then I can open it. And it opens up in Excel. And it looks something like this, so here's all the headers that are associated in MyEV. Here are all the different blocks, and they have block IDs and block names, and you can add columns and add information into that. So let me show you something graphically that might be a little bit easier to follow. Okay, so I download my CSV file and I want to add my economic information to it. So I've highlighted, in this case, the block ID in red, meaning you do not want to change the block ID. This is what MyEV looks at to say, this is the railroad block, this is the farm or the barn block, whatever block you've named it, right? It reaches into that unique ID number and captures all this data so that it can visualize it later. Okay, so from our economic analysis, what did I do? I have my block ID, I have my block names, and then I have my yield in tons per acre. So where did I get that information? I got it off the weigh slip. So when we delivered fruit to either the winery or the processing plant, you get your slip and the total number of tons that were harvested off a particular block. You can turn that into tons per acre. And I marry that with the cost of production. And you're like, okay, where did I come up with those numbers? So I sat down with the guys, Dan Sprague and Andy Joy, who do, a lot of the farm management, and Ted Taft at Clairol. And we sat down and we talked about what's the cost of production for our different varieties, whether they're juice grape varieties, hybrids, wine grape varieties, everything from pruning. So, we calculated for our Concord, we calculated as a machine prune with a manual hand follow-up, anything we did with floor management, nutrient management, pest management, harvesting, operation of equipment. So from fuel, tractor maintenance, hours of a person on a tractor, we, put all of that into our kind of annual cost of production, which came out to be $1,977 per acre. My old rule of thumb has always been $1,500 an acre production costs for Concord. And this varies with every operation, but I always use the number of 1,500. But as we all know, in the last couple of years, inflation has driven up the price of fertilizer, the price of fuel, the price of labor. So that number, that cost of production number, keeps creeping up year after year. Okay, so all this goes into my economic analysis. I have my yield, I have my production cost per acre, I have my price paid for grapes. Where do I get that from? I go to Hans Walter Peterson's grape price sheet that he puts out every year on his website for the Finger Lakes Grape Program. And in this particular analysis, I just use the average cash market price for the different varieties that we grow at Clairol. Back to my sheet. Okay, have my yield, my production cost, my cash price per acre. So I can calculate what's my grape revenue on a per block basis, what is my production cost on a per block basis, and I subtract those two, look at the difference between those two, and I get my profit or loss per block. And I can also calculate that on a per acre basis. Okay, so I've added this economic data to my block level data, save this file as a CSV, and re-upload it to MyEV. Get rid of that. So in this case, I would save that file as a CSV. I would import that data file. So it's important you know what you named it and where you put it so you can go find it. Upload that data back to MyEV, and then you can visualize it. So I've already gone through this process. I did my analysis, I uploaded that data file, and now here are the headers that come off of that CSV file. So you can see I've done my yield, my production cost per acre, my grape revenue, and my profit and loss. So yeah, and you can visualize any of the data that you want. So in terms of yield, I can see where I had high yield or low yield, or what my production cost per acre were. And then, but most importantly, we're looking at profit or loss. Okay, so in this case, some of my Concord blocks are in the red, so I'm not gaining very much money there. Some of them are in this kind of yellow-green area where I'm gaining money. And I could label my blocks by what that actual profit or loss was for that particular block. For example, in our barn block, we made a whopping $94 profit out of that acreage. So from a managerial standpoint, I'm like, hey, that's not good enough. I'm gonna have to do some better management in that vineyard. This railroad block, I profited 1,536. In my Niagara block, yield was high, prices were high, production costs were low, so my profit margin was much higher at 5,898. So that's how I can see, what varieties, what blocks are gaining money, which ones are losing money, and then where can I focus my management next year in terms of, do I want to change some varieties? Do I want to focus on improving my management in particular blocks to make things better? So the next level of this economic analysis is to do it on a sub-block level. And the process is the same. I'm going to collect some spatial data. In this case, I'm going to collect spatial yield data from my yield monitor on my mechanical harvester at harvest. I'm going to collect that data. I'm going to download it. I'm going to add my economic data in an Excel sheet or a CSV file, and then I'm going to re-upload it back to MyEV and then look at it spatially to see what parts of the vineyard I should focus on next. Okay, so in this case, I wanted to look at what was the profit of my Concord blocks across the farm. And I created a folder of economic analysis, and I started with yield. So this was yield off of the whole farm, coming from our yield monitor that it's on our grape harvester. I went through the process of, snapping that data to blocks, interpolating the data, and you can watch other videos on how to do that process, so that I ended up with an interpolated version of the yield from 2022 that just came off of Concord blocks. Now, I download that data, so I hit the download button. I open that up in Excel, and I have my X, Y coordinates, and I have my yield. And then from there, I can have my yield in terms of tons per acre. So I can put in my production costs. I can put in the price paid for Concord based on the cash market price, and then calculate a profit and re-upload that back into MyEV. And when I do that, I come up with this spatial data. So I have profit for 2022. And I went back, I did the same analysis for 2021. So my cost of production was a little bit lower in 2021. The yield was a bit higher in 2021. But the price paid for Concord was a little bit less also in 2021. So that shifts everything in my economic analysis. So this is what the map looked like in 2021 and then 2022. So I looked at a 2-year profit mean across the farm. So that is telling me where I'm consistently either making money or losing money, depending on what I'm doing and the growth of the vines and the yield and the price and everything else that goes into the economic analysis. So I can see here from a 2-year profit mean, I've got areas of my vineyard. Up here in Barn Block, the west side of that block is very dry soil. We had a dry year in 2022, so it's really struggling. And I need to do something about that part of the block in terms of, say, floor management, water conservation, to try to increase the vine size and yield and increase the profit of that block. Zone 1, in this, say, red orange area, I'm either losing money at $618 or gaining, say, $287 per acre, and that needs to be better. So I know I need to focus on those areas. In the railroad block, so this is on a slope, this is at a higher elevation, this is at a lower elevation. You can see from where these ponds are forming that this has a very high water table down here. So, say I wanted to put in more tile drainage into this field, I don't have to tile drain the whole field. I just need to tile drain this area that has a high water table, if I can figure out where I want to put the water to increase. Again, grapes don't like wet feet. So by draining that part of the field, I could increase the vine size, productivity, and profitability of that entire block. But this spatial data gives me that power to be able to identify where is it that I'm actually consistently losing money? Where do I need to focus my management operations in the future to make the whole farm more profitable? You can also look So if you want to look at some of the statistics on this data. So overall, you could say, oh my gosh, look at he's losing money in these areas and it's just not profitable to farm. If you look at the spatial data, the distribution, the population distribution of all the data in these blocks, we are roughly the 2-year mean is about $1,100 per acre on 18 acres. So that's about a $20,000 profit per year. So after I've paid out all the costs of production, all the labor, all the machinery, all the fuel, all that stuff is, and then I harvest the fruit and sell it, I'm profiting about $20,000 a year per year on just my Concord blocks alone. So that gives you, it gives you a starting point. And then you could say, is that a profitable business for me, or do I need to improve it, or where do I need to improve it? Okay, so that's 2 ways of looking at the kind of end of year after harvest. What is the profitability of my different blocks, or on a sub-block level? How can I use spatial data to identify areas that I need to focus my management for the next year? If you have issues with MyEV or using it, or you identify bugs during this process, hit this bullhorn and you can send us a message that would either go to me or Nick Gunner, who is our software specialist, and we will address that issue for you or get back to you to find out what more you're having trouble with so that we can address it. Okay. Thanks, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this, and have fun pruning.